Sarah Chen stared at the official notification screen floating above her kitchen table, the blue holographic text burning into her retinas like acid. The words hadn't changed in the 3 hours since the message arrived, but she kept reading them anyway, hoping somehow they would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chun, serial number 7749 Delta 7, is confirmed deceased in the defense of Kepler Station. His sacrifice in the final battle against the Zarathi fleet will be remembered. His personal effects and dependents will be processed according to Military Protocol 15C. Dependents. The word made her stomach twist. She wasn't just a dependent anymore. She was a widow at 28, left alone on a frontier colony world with a child who wasn't entirely human. The kitchen door chimed softly, and Zara walked in from the garden, her small hands covered in dirt from the vegetable patch. At 7 years old, she looked almost completely human, except for the slight silver tint to her eyes and the way her hair seemed to catch light that wasn't quite there. Marcus had always said she was perfect, that it didn't matter what anyone else thought about human-alien relationships or the children that came from them. "Mama, the tomatoes are growing really fast today," Zara announced, wiping her hands on her shorts. "I think they like the new fertilizer you bought." Sarah forced a smile and closed the notification with a gesture. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Why don't you wash up for lunch?" Zara tilted her head, studying her mother's face with those too perceptive eyes. "You've been crying again. Is it because of the message this morning?" Sometimes Sarah forgot how smart her daughter was. The Kithany genetics that Marcus's former teammate had contributed didn't just affect Zara's appearance. Her intelligence developed faster than human normal, and she picked up on emotional cues that most children missed entirely. "Yes, baby." The message was about Daddy. "Is he coming home?" The question hit like a physical blow. Sarah had been dreading this conversation for months, ever since the news feeds started reporting heavy casualties in the Zarathi conflict. Marcus had been assigned to the Forward Defense Fleet, protecting the outer colonies from the insectoid aliens who seemed determined to wipe out every human settlement they encountered. "No, sweetheart. Daddy won't be coming home. He died fighting to keep us safe." Zara's expression didn't change immediately. She processed the information the way she processed everything else, thoughtfully and completely. Then, her lower lip began to tremble, and Sarah caught her as she collapsed into tears. They held each other in the kitchen while the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Outside, the colony continued its daily routine. Hover trucks delivered supplies to the prefab houses scattered across the valley. Children played in the communal spaces between residential blocks. Life went on, indifferent to the fact that Sarah's world had just shattered into pieces. After Zara cried herself into exhaustion, Sarah carried her to bed for a nap. The little girl's breathing settled into the deep rhythm of sleep, but her silver eyes moved rapidly beneath closed lids. Another Kithany trait that Marcus had explained to her years ago. Even while sleeping, Zara's mind worked at processing information and solving problems. Sarah returned to the kitchen and opened her personal communication terminal. 17 messages waited in her inbox, most from other military wives offering condolences. 2 were from Marcus's squadron mates who had survived the battle. 1 was from his commanding officer, Colonel Harrison, promising that Marcus had died heroically and that his sacrifice mattered. The last message made her hands shake. It was from the Colonial Relocation Authority. "Mrs. Chun, given the change in your family status and the unique circumstances of your dependent, we recommend immediate relocation to a more suitable facility. Mixed heritage children require specialized educational and social services that Kepler Colony cannot provide. Transport to Earth Central has been arranged. Departure in 72 hours. This relocation is mandatory under Colonial Policy 7 Alpha." Sarah read the message 3 times before the full meaning sank in. They wanted to take Zara away from the only home she had ever known, away from the garden she loved, and the wide open spaces where she could run without worrying about stares or whispered comments. They wanted to put her in some kind of facility where other mixed heritage children were studied and monitored and treated like specimens instead of people. "Over my dead body," Sarah whispered to the empty kitchen. She spent the next 2 hours researching Colonial Policy 7 Alpha and the facilities where mixed heritage children were housed. What she found made her sick. The files were heavily redacted, but the basic facts were clear enough. Children like Zara were considered security risks, their alien genetics making them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. They were separated from their human parents and raised in controlled environments where their abilities could be monitored and managed. Some of the children adapted well to institutional life. Others didn't adapt at all. Sarah had grown up on frontier worlds herself. Her parents had been agricultural specialists who helped establish farming communities on newly terraformed planets. She knew how to live off the land, how to repair basic equipment, and how to disappear into the wilderness when necessary. Marcus had taught her more advanced survival skills during their years together, including how to avoid orbital surveillance and how to set up communication networks that couldn't be easily tracked. She also knew that Kepler Colony was at the edge of human space, surrounded by unexplored systems and uncharted worlds. If someone wanted to disappear with a 7-year-old girl, this was the place to do it. The decision crystallized in her mind with startling clarity. She wouldn't let them take Zara. She wouldn't let her daughter become another file in some bureaucrat's database, another test subject in some military research program. Marcus had died fighting for their freedom. She would honor that sacrifice by making sure Zara grew up free. Sarah began planning their escape that afternoon. She had 72 hours to gather supplies, arrange transportation, and find somewhere to go where the colonial authority couldn't reach them. It should have been impossible. But as she started making lists and checking resources, she remembered something Marcus had told her years ago. Humans don't give up, he had said after a particularly difficult mission briefing. That's what makes us dangerous to our enemies and valuable to our allies. We find a way, even when there isn't supposed to be one. Sarah looked out the window toward the mountains that ringed Kepler Colony. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay unexplored territory and unregistered settlements where 2 refugees might be able to build a new life. It would be dangerous, especially with a child who stood out from normal humans. But staying meant losing Zara to a system that saw her as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. The choice was obvious. When Zara woke from her nap, Sarah was already packing their most essential belongings. Her daughter appeared in the doorway rubbing her eyes, still disoriented from sleep. "Mama, what are you doing?" "We're going on a trip, sweetheart." "A long one. Where are we going?" Sarah knelt down and took her daughter's hands. Those silver eyes looked back at her with complete trust, and Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders like armor. "I don't know yet, but we're going to find somewhere safe, where we can be together and you can grow up without anyone telling us how to live." Zara nodded solemnly. "Because of the bad people who want to take me away?" Sometimes her daughter's perceptiveness was startling. "How did you know about that?" "I heard you talking on the communication terminal. My hearing is better than most humans." Zara squeezed her mother's hands. "Daddy told me that if anything happened to him, you would keep me safe no matter what." "He said that last time he was on leave. He said humans are really good at protecting the people they love, even when it seems impossible." Sarah pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "Your father was right. We're going to be fine, baby. We're going to be more than fine." As the sun set over Kepler Colony, Sarah Chin finished packing the supplies that would carry them into an uncertain future. Outside, the colony's lights began to twinkle in the gathering darkness. Soon those lights would be nothing but a memory. Tomorrow, they would disappear into the wilderness and begin the most important mission of Sarah's life, keeping her daughter free, no matter the cost. The hover truck Sarah had rented under her maintenance certification credentials hummed quietly through the pre-dawn darkness. In the passenger seat, Zara slept curled up in her safety harness, a worn stuffed animal clutched against her chest. The toy had been a gift from Marcus during his last leave, a small dragon with fabric wings that Zara had named Keeper. Sarah kept the truck's altitude low, following livestock trails and maintenance roads that wouldn't register on the colony's traffic monitoring system. According to her route calculations, they had 6 hours before anyone noticed she had failed to report for the mandatory relocation transport. By then, she planned to be deep in the White Rock Mountains where orbital surveillance couldn't penetrate the mineral deposits that interfered with scanning equipment. The landscape outside gradually shifted from cultivated farmland to wild terrain. Scraggly trees replaced orderly crop rows. Rocky outcroppings jutted from hillsides covered in native vegetation that looked almost Earth-normal except for the subtle blue tint to the leaves. Kepler was one of the better terraforming success stories, close enough to Earth standard that humans could live comfortably without environmental suits. As the first hints of sunrise appeared on the horizon, Sarah reached the rendezvous point she had arranged the night before. A small clearing beside a mountain stream, accessible only by an old mining road that most people had forgotten existed. She settled the hover truck onto the ground and checked her chronometer. Right on time. 10 minutes later, another vehicle emerged from the tree line. An older model atmospheric transport painted in the faded colors of an independent freight company. The driver who climbed out was someone Sarah had hoped never to see again, but who represented her best chance of getting Zara to safety. "Hello, Sarah. It's been a long time." Dr. Elena Vasquez looked exactly as Sarah remembered her from 7 years ago. Tall, angular, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. She had been the xenobiologist assigned to study Zara's unique genetics when the little girl was born. She had also been the person who ultimately convinced the colonial authority to let Marcus and Sarah raise their daughter instead of placing her in a research facility. "Elena, thank you for coming. I told you to call me if you ever needed help." "I meant it." Elena glanced toward the hover truck where Zara was beginning to stir. "How is she handling the news about Marcus?" "She's stronger than I am, I think. But that might change when she realizes we can't go home. Children are remarkably adaptable, especially children like Zara." Elena walked closer to the truck, studying Zara's sleeping form through the transparent steel window. "Her development has accelerated since I last saw her. The Kithany neural pathways are integrating faster than my models predicted." Sarah felt a familiar spike of defensive anger. "She's my daughter, not a research subject." "I know that. Better than most." Elena turned back to face her. "That's why I'm here instead of reporting your location to the authorities." The tension between them stretched for a moment before Sarah forced herself to relax. Elena had always walked a careful line between her scientific curiosity and genuine concern for Zara's welfare. When the original review board had wanted to separate the family immediately after Zara's birth, Elena had been the one who argued for keeping them together. Her reports had emphasized Zara's emotional stability and normal social development, downplaying the more exotic aspects of her abilities. "Where are you taking us?" Sarah asked. "New Harmony. It's an unregistered settlement about 200 kilometers from here, founded by families who left the main colonies for various reasons. They don't ask questions about people's backgrounds, and they have experience with children who don't fit standard classifications." Sarah had heard rumors about places like New Harmony, off-the-books communities that existed in the gaps between official colonial territories. Some were criminal havens or separatist compounds. Others were simply groups of people who wanted to live without government oversight. What's the catch? Life is harder there. No advanced medical facilities, no automated systems, no connection to the colonial communication network. You'll have to work for everything you need, and there's always the risk that the authorities will eventually find the settlement and shut it down. What about Zara? Will she be safe there? Elena's expression softened. There are 3 other mixed heritage children in New Harmony already. Their parents faced the same challenges you do. The community has learned to protect them. Zara chose that moment to wake up, blinking in the morning light streaming through the truck's windows. She unbuckled her safety harness and climbed out, immediately spotting Elena. "Dr. Vasquez, are you coming with us on our adventure?" "Hello, Zara. You've grown since I last saw you." Elena knelt down to Zara's eye level. "I'm going to help you and your mother get to a new place where you'll be safe." "Good. Mama has been worried about the bad people who want to take me away from her." Zara tilted her head, studying Elena with those unsettling silver eyes. "You're worried about something too. Your heart is beating faster than normal." Elena glanced at Sarah with raised eyebrows. "Enhanced hearing and biological perception. Those abilities are developing ahead of schedule. Is that bad?" Sarah asked. "Not bad, just significant." Elena stood up and brushed dust off her knees. "We should get moving. I want to reach New Harmony before the afternoon surveillance sweeps begin." They transferred their essential supplies to Elena's transport, leaving the hover truck hidden under camouflage netting. Sarah had stripped out the vehicle's navigation system and tracking transponder, but she knew the authorities would find it eventually. By then, she hoped they would be safely hidden in New Harmony's community. The journey took them deeper into mountains that few colonists had ever explored. Elena followed routes that weren't on any official maps, winding through valleys and across ridgelines that provided natural barriers against orbital observation. The transport's navigation system had been modified with additional encryption, and Elena clearly knew the terrain well. "How long have you been helping people like us?" Sarah asked as they climbed toward a high mountain pass. 5 years. Ever since the colonial authorities started implementing the new policies for mixed heritage children. Elena's hands moved confidently on the controls, adjusting their altitude to stay below scanning thresholds. "I've seen what happens in those facilities, Sarah. The children survive, but they don't thrive. They become disconnected from their human heritage and confused about their place in the universe." "How many children have you helped relocate?" 14 families. Most of them are doing well in settlements like New Harmony. A few chose to go even further out, to worlds beyond the colonial expansion zone. In the back seat, Zara had fallen asleep again, lulled by the steady humming of the transport's engines. Her stuffed dragon had slipped from her grasp, and Sarah reached back to tuck it securely under her arm. "What did you tell the authorities about Marcus?" Sarah asked quietly. "The truth, that he was an exemplary officer who died defending the colony. His service record speaks for itself." Elena's voice carried a note of sadness. "I knew him before he met you, when he was still recovering from his injuries. He never talked much about that time. He wouldn't. Marcus blamed himself for the loss of his first squad, even though the mission failure wasn't his fault. Meeting you and starting a family gave him something positive to focus on." Elena glanced at Sarah through the transport's reflection. "He would be proud of what you're doing now." "I hope so. Sometimes I feel like I'm just running away from problems instead of solving them." Protecting your child isn't running away. It's the most fundamental human instinct there is. Elena adjusted their course slightly, following a river valley that carved through the mountains like a natural highway. The Kithani understand that too. It's one of the things our species have in common. You've studied them extensively? As much as anyone can. They're not easy to understand, even for people who spend their careers trying to bridge the gap between human and alien psychology. Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. "But they value family bonds just as much as we do. Maybe more." The transport crested a final ridge, and Elena pointed toward a valley spread out below them. At first glance, it looked empty except for native forest and a stream that meandered through meadows dotted with wildflowers. Then, Sarah spotted the subtle signs of human habitation: gardens carved from clearings, solar collection arrays disguised as natural rock formations, and buildings built into hillsides so they blended with the landscape. "Welcome to New Harmony," Elena announced. As they descended toward the hidden settlement, Sarah felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. This place would either become Zara's sanctuary or another temporary stop in a longer journey toward an uncertain future. But, for the first time since receiving the relocation notice, she believed they might actually have a chance. The transport touched down in a clearing at the edge of the settlement, and people began emerging from the surrounding buildings. Men and women of various ages, all with the practical, weathered look of people who worked hard for everything they had. Several children ran ahead of the adults, curious about the newcomers. One of those children caught Sarah's immediate attention. A boy who appeared to be about 10 years old, with golden-brown skin and eyes that held flecks of green and silver. Another mixed heritage child, she realized. And, from the confident way he approached their transport, a child who had never learned to hide what he was. Zara woke as the engines wound down, immediately alert and focused on the activity outside. "Are these our new neighbors, Mama?" "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." The settlement of New Harmony was larger than Sarah had expected, with nearly 200 people living in structures that seemed to grow naturally from the mountainous terrain. Thomas Reeves, the community's informal leader, gave them a tour that revealed sophisticated systems hidden beneath the rustic appearance. Geothermal power plants built into natural hot springs. Water purification systems that looked like decorative rock gardens. Communication arrays disguised as dead trees. "We've learned to hide in plain sight," Thomas explained as they walked along pathways that wound between terraced gardens. Orbital surveillance sees a wilderness area with minimal human impact. Ground-based sensors detect normal geological activity and indigenous wildlife. Sarah carried Zara, who had grown tired during the walking tour but remained alert and curious about everything she saw. Other children followed at a respectful distance, clearly fascinated by the newcomers, but too well-mannered to intrude. The mixed heritage boy Sarah had noticed earlier stayed closest, occasionally catching Zara's eye and offering shy smiles. "That's Alex," Thomas said, noticing Sarah's attention. "His parents brought him here 3 years ago when the authorities tried to place him in a military research program. His mother was a colonial Marine who served alongside an Altarian unit during the border conflicts. How has he adapted to life here? Better than anyone expected. Mixed heritage children seem to thrive when they're not constantly told they're different or dangerous." Thomas stopped beside a large community building built into a hillside. "This is our school and meeting hall. We have 12 children in the settlement now, ranging from age 4 to 16. Inside the building, Sarah was impressed by the quality of the educational equipment and resources. Advanced learning terminals, a well-stocked library with both physical and digital texts, and laboratory equipment that would have been expensive even in an official colony. Everything was clean, well-maintained, and clearly designed for serious academic work. "Where did you get all of this?" Sarah asked. "Donations, mostly. There are people throughout the colonial territories who support what we're doing here. Doctors, teachers, scientists who believe children should be raised by families instead of institutions." Thomas gestured toward a corner where several young people worked on complex mathematics problems. "We also have parents with advanced degrees who serve as instructors." Zara wiggled to be put down, immediately drawn to a section of the building where younger children worked on art projects. She approached slowly, still holding her stuffed dragon, and watched as a girl about her own age painted a landscape on a digital canvas. "Hi," the girl said without looking up from her work. "I'm Maya. You must be the new girl Dr. Vasquez told us about." "I'm Zara. That's a really pretty picture." "Thanks. It's the view from my bedroom window." Maya finally looked up, revealing eyes that were completely gold without any visible pupils. "Wow, your eyes are really unusual too. I like the silver color." Sarah tensed, waiting for Zara's typical reaction to comments about her appearance. But instead of becoming self-conscious, her daughter smiled and sat down beside Maya. "My daddy said they came from the Kithani side of my family. What about yours?" "Centaurian. My mom says they change color when I'm thinking really hard." Maya grinned and returned to her painting. "Want to try? There's another canvas right here." Sarah watched her daughter settle into easy conversation with Maya and felt some of the constant tension in her shoulders finally relax. For the first time in years, Zara was interacting with another child who didn't stare at her or ask uncomfortable questions about her heritage. "It gets easier," said a quiet voice behind her. Sarah turned to find a woman about her own age watching the children with a knowing expression. She was tall and athletic with premature gray streaking through dark hair, and she carried herself with the unmistakable bearing of someone with military experience. "I'm Commander Rebecca Torres, former Colonial Marines, current head of security for New Harmony." The woman extended her hand with a firm grip. "My son Alex is the one who's been following you around all afternoon." Sarah Chun. "And yes, I noticed Alex. He seems like a good kid." "He is. But 3 years ago, he was angry all the time and convinced that he was some kind of monster because that's what the testing protocols told him." Rebecca nodded toward where Alex had finally worked up the courage to approach Zara and Maya. "Living here changed that. How do you handle security? I mean, eventually someone is going to notice this place. We have early warning systems throughout the mountains and contingency plans for emergency relocations. More importantly, we have legal protection." Rebecca's smile held an edge. "New Harmony is technically a registered agricultural research station. Our paperwork is completely legitimate, just carefully incomplete." Sarah raised an eyebrows. "That seems risky. Everything worth doing is risky. But the legal structure gives us time to relocate families if the authorities get too interested in our activities." Rebecca gestured toward the children, who were now engaged in an animated discussion about different artistic techniques. The question is whether you're planning to stay long enough to make this place home, or if you're using us as a way station while you figure out your next move. It was a fair question, and Sarah realized she didn't have a good answer. Her focus had been entirely on escaping the relocation order and getting Zara somewhere safe. She hadn't thought much about what came next. "I don't know," she admitted. "A week ago, I thought we'd be living on Kepler Colony until Zara grew up. Everything changed when Marcus was killed. I understand. I went through something similar when Alex's father died in the Altarian conflict." Rebecca's expression softened. "But running from one crisis to the next isn't sustainable, especially with a child who needs stability." That evening, the entire community gathered in the meeting hall for what Thomas called a welcoming dinner. Tables were arranged in a large circle, and everyone brought dishes made from ingredients grown in the settlement's gardens or produced by their small-scale manufacturing systems. The food was simple but good, and the conversation flowed easily among people who clearly knew each other well. Zara sat between Alex and Maya, chattering happily about everything she had seen during the day. Sarah noticed that the other children asked questions about her background with casual curiosity rather than the uncomfortable fascination she was used to encountering. Here, being different was normal. "She's adapting quickly," said Dr. Vasquez, who had decided to stay overnight before returning to her official duties. "Children are remarkably resilient when they feel accepted." "I can see that. But Rebecca raised a good point earlier. I need to think about long-term plans, not just immediate safety." "What kind of work did you do before becoming a military wife?" "Agricultural systems design. I specialized in hydroponics and sustainable farming for frontier colonies." Sarah watched Zara demonstrate some kind of hand game to the other children. "I helped design the growing systems for 6 different settlements before I met Marcus. New Harmony could use someone with those skills. We're entirely self-sufficient for food production, but we're always looking for ways to improve efficiency and expand our capabilities." Elena paused thoughtfully. "There's also the question of Zara's education. Her cognitive development is accelerating faster than I initially predicted." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means she's going to need advanced instruction much sooner than a normal human child would. By the time she's 10, she'll probably be ready for university-level coursework in multiple subjects." Elena kept her voice low to avoid being overheard. "Places like New Harmony are ideal for gifted children because instruction can be individualized and accelerated without bureaucratic interference." Sarah considered this information while watching her daughter laugh at something Alex had whispered to her. Zara did seem happier than she had been in months, even with the trauma of losing her father. The constant stress of hiding her abilities and pretending to be completely human had been wearing on all of them. "What about the other mixed heritage families? How are they doing long-term?" "Better than they would be in official facilities, but it varies by individual situation." Elena gestured toward a family seated across the circle. "The Hendersons have been here for 4 years with their daughter Lucy. She's 14 now and serves as a teaching assistant for the younger children. Her enhanced empathic abilities make her exceptionally good at helping others learn." "And the challenges?" "Social isolation from the larger human community. Limited opportunities for advanced specialized education. The constant awareness that discovery could force emergency relocation." Elena's voice carried the weight of professional experience. "But those challenges exist anywhere mixed heritage families try to live openly." After dinner, Sarah helped with cleaning while Zara participated in a storytelling circle with the other children. An elderly man named Professor Chun, no relation despite the shared surname, was recounting a tale about early human exploration of their region. The children listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of complex concepts. "Education is the cornerstone of everything we do here," Thomas said, joining Sarah at the washing station. "We're not just hiding from the authorities. We're building a community that can raise children to be confident in who they are while still preparing them to eventually interact with the broader human society." "How do you handle that balance?" "Carefully. Some of our young people have chosen to stay here as adults and contribute to the community. Others have left to pursue opportunities in the outside world, using falsified identification documents and careful behavior modification to pass as normal humans. Thomas dried a plate with methodical precision. The important thing is that they have choices. Later that night, Sarah sat on the porch of the guest house where she and Zara had been given temporary accommodations. Her daughter slept soundly in the adjoining room, exhausted by the day's activities and apparently content with their new surroundings. Through the windows, Sarah could see the lights of New Harmony scattered throughout the valley like a constellation brought down to earth. For the first time since receiving the relocation notice, she felt something that might have been hope. This place wasn't perfect, but it offered something she had never expected to find. A community where Zara could grow up knowing there were others like her, where being different was celebrated rather than feared. Marcus would have liked it here, she realized. He had always said that humans were at their best when they were taking care of each other, regardless of what obstacles they faced. New Harmony embodied that philosophy in ways that the official colonies never could. Maybe Rebecca was right. Maybe it was time to stop running from one crisis to the next and start building something permanent. Maybe it was time to make this hidden valley a real home for herself and her extraordinary daughter. 6 months after arriving at New Harmony, Sarah stood in the community's newest hydroponic facility, watching nutrient solution flow through growing channels she had designed herself. The system produced 30% more food than the settlement's previous growing methods while using half the water and energy. More importantly, it had given her a sense of purpose beyond simply hiding from the authorities. The yield reports are impressive, Thomas said, reviewing data on his tablet. If we can replicate this system in the other growing stations, we'll have surplus food to trade with neighboring settlements. The beauty of modular design, Sarah replied, adjusting the nutrient mixture for a section of root vegetables. Each unit can be customized for specific crops while maintaining overall system efficiency. Through the facility's transparent steel walls, she could see children playing in the community's central area. Zara was among them, engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion with Alex and Maya about something they were building from recycled materials. Her daughter had grown noticeably in the past 6 months, and not just physically. Her confidence had blossomed along with her intellectual capabilities. Speaking of impressive reports, Thomas continued, Professor Chen wanted to discuss Zara's educational progress with you. Apparently, she's ready for advanced mathematics and theoretical physics coursework. Sarah wasn't surprised. Zara had been working through university-level materials for weeks, often staying up late reading about topics that fascinated her. Just last night, she had tried to explain quantum probability to Sarah using her stuffed dragon as a visual aid. The explanation had been mostly beyond Sarah's comprehension, but completely coherent. How advanced are we talking about? Graduate level in some subjects. Professor Chin thinks she might be ready to contribute to actual research projects within a year or 2. Thomas paused his data review to look directly at Sarah, which brings up some questions about her future that we probably should discuss. Before Sarah could respond, the facility's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Thomas activated the display, and Commander Torres's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim. Thomas, we have a situation. Long-range sensors detected a Colonial Authority survey ship conducting detailed scans of our region. They're still 3 days out, but their trajectory suggests this isn't a random patrol. Sarah felt the familiar cold knot of fear forming in her stomach. Do you think they found us? Unclear. Could be routine expansion survey work, or it could be a targeted search. Rebecca's voice remained calm and professional. Either way, we're implementing Contingency Protocol 7. All families with mixed heritage children need to be ready for emergency relocation within 12 hours. The protocols had been drilled countless times, but Sarah had hoped they would never need to be used. Each family had prepared emergency supply kits and predetermined rally points scattered throughout the mountains. If the settlement was discovered, they would scatter and reconvene at alternate locations until the immediate danger passed. What about the agricultural systems? Sarah asked. And the children's education materials? Non-essential items will be abandoned if necessary. Thomas replied tersely. Our priority is protecting the people, especially the children. That afternoon became a whirlwind of careful preparation disguised as normal activities. Essential supplies were discreetly moved to hidden caches. Computer systems were backed up and sensitive data encrypted. Children were briefed on evacuation procedures using language that emphasized adventure rather than danger. Zara took the news with characteristic thoughtfulness, asking practical questions about what they could take and how long they might be away from New Harmony. She seemed more concerned about her friends than about her own safety, which struck Sarah as both touching and slightly worrying. Will Alex and Maya be going to the same place we are? Zara asked as they packed their emergency kit. I don't know, sweetheart. The family split up to make it harder for anyone to track us. Sarah folded clothes with automatic efficiency while her mind raced through contingency plans. But we'll all come back together once it's safe. What if it's not safe for a long time? It was a question Sarah had been trying not to think about. Then, we'll figure out how to make a new safe place, wherever we end up. Zara nodded and carefully placed her stuffed dragon in the center of their pack. Daddy always said humans were good at making new homes when they had to. That evening, the community held what appeared to be a normal dinner gathering. But Sarah could feel the underlying tension in every conversation. Parents spoke in careful codes when discussing the next day's activities. Children seemed more subdued than usual, picking up on adult anxiety despite efforts to maintain normal routines. Dr. Vasquez had returned to the settlement that afternoon, ostensibly for a routine follow-up visit, but actually to help coordinate the evacuation if it became necessary. She sat with Sarah and several other parents, discussing contingency plans in language that wouldn't alarm any listening children. The secondary site is well prepared, Elena assured them quietly. Temporary housing, basic educational resources, and communication equipment. If we have to relocate, the children's routines can continue with minimal disruption. How long before we know if the survey ship is actually a threat? Asked Rebecca Torres, who had been monitoring communications from the settlement's hidden sensor network. Their current course will bring them within detailed scanning range tomorrow afternoon. If they deviate from standard survey patterns or deploy specialized equipment, we'll know they're looking for something specific. Elena's expression was carefully neutral. Either way, I recommend beginning phased relocation tonight. The decision was made to move the most vulnerable families immediately, while maintaining enough normal activity to avoid suspecting surveillance. Sarah and Zara would be in the first group, along with the other mixed heritage children and their parents. If the settlement was discovered, they would already be safe at the backup location. As night fell, Sarah found herself walking through New Harmony one last time, memorizing details she might never see again. The terrace gardens where Zara had learned to grow vegetables. The workshop where Alex had taught her to build mechanical devices. The library where Maya had introduced her to alien literature translated into human languages. This place had become home in ways Sarah hadn't expected. Not just a refuge from the authorities, but a community where her daughter could develop her extraordinary abilities without shame or fear. Losing it would be devastating for all of them, but especially for the children who had never known anywhere else where they could be themselves completely. Second thoughts? Asked a quiet voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Thomas approaching along the path, his own expression reflective and melancholy. More like recognition of what we built here, and what we might be losing. New Harmony was always intended to be temporary, Thomas said, joining her at the overlook that provided the best view of the entire settlement. A safe harbor while we figured out longer-term solutions for our families. Have you figured out those solutions? Some of them. We've established contact with 3 other settlements like this one, scattered across different sectors. We've also been working with sympathetic officials in the Colonial Authority to change policies regarding mixed heritage children. Thomas paused thoughtfully. Change is coming, Sarah. Slowly, but it's coming. What kind of change? Recognition that diversity makes humanity stronger, not weaker. That children like Zara represent opportunities rather than threats. His voice carried quiet conviction. Your daughter and others like her are going to help our species navigate relationships with alien civilizations that we can't even imagine yet. Sarah considered this perspective while watching lights twinkle in windows throughout the valley below. It was easy to focus on immediate dangers and forget about larger implications. But Marcus had died fighting to protect not just their family, but humanity's future among the stars. Maybe ensuring Zara could develop her full potential was part of honoring that sacrifice. Do you really believe the policies will change? I have to believe it. Because the alternative is accepting that we'll always have to hide who our children are. Thomas turned to face her directly. But change doesn't happen automatically. It happens because people like you make different choices and force the system to adapt. Later that night, Sarah lay in bed listening to Zara's steady breathing and trying to imagine what tomorrow might bring. The evacuation could be temporary, leading to a quick return to new harmony within days. Or it could mark the beginning of another long journey toward an uncertain destination. Either way, she was no longer the same person who had fled Kepler Colony 6 months earlier. That woman had been focused entirely on escape and survival. This woman was part of a community working toward lasting solutions for all mixed heritage families. The difference mattered, both for her own sense of purpose and for the example she was setting for Zara. Outside, the first transport vehicles were already moving quietly through the darkness, carrying families toward temporary safety. Soon it would be their turn to leave this place that had become home. But, unlike their flight from Kepler Colony, this departure carried hope along with uncertainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as part of something larger than themselves. And that made all the difference in the universe. 3 years later, Sarah stood before the Colonial Authority's Special Commission on Interspecies Relations, addressing a panel of officials who would have arrested her not long ago. The hearing room was packed with representatives from military commands, scientific institutions, and advocacy groups, all focused on legislation that would fundamentally change how human-alien hybrid children were treated throughout colonial space. Honored commissioners, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. 3 years ago, I was forced to choose between my daughter's freedom and compliance with policies that treated her as a security threat rather than a child with extraordinary potential. Today, I stand before you as living proof that those policies were not only wrong, but actively harmful to humanity's future. In the gallery behind her, Zara sat with Alex, Maya, and 6 other mixed-heritage young people who had become the faces of a movement that had grown far beyond what anyone had anticipated. At 10 years old, Zara looked remarkably composed for someone whose testimony would help determine the fate of hundreds of children like herself across human space. The commission's chairwoman, Admiral Patricia Morrison, leaned forward with obvious interest. Mrs. Chun, your daughter's recent contributions to xenolinguistic research have been remarkable for someone her age. Can you explain how she developed those capabilities outside of official educational institutions? Zara thrived when she was allowed to learn without restrictions or fear of being studied like a laboratory specimen, Sarah replied. In New Harmony and similar communities, mixed heritage children develop their abilities naturally while maintaining strong connections to their human heritage. The result is young people who understand both cultures and can serve as bridges between species. It had been a long journey to this moment. The Colonial Authorities survey ship had indeed discovered New Harmony's location, but instead of conducting arrests, the investigating team had been led by Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been working within the system to document the success of community-based approaches to mixed heritage education. Her reports had eventually reached officials high enough in the colonial administration to initiate policy reviews. The breakthrough had come when Zara and several other mixed heritage children had successfully mediated a dangerous first contact situation with an unknown alien species. Their unique psychological perspectives and enhanced sensory abilities had allowed them to establish communication and prevent what could have become a disastrous conflict. Suddenly, children who had been seen as problems were being recognized as invaluable assets to humanity's expansion into space. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Morrison continued, addressing Elena, who sat at the expert witness table. Your longitudinal studies of mixed heritage children raised in community environments show remarkably positive outcomes. How do these compare to institutional approaches? The differences are dramatic, Admiral. Children raised in families and supportive communities show superior intellectual development, better emotional stability, and stronger identification with human values. More importantly, they demonstrate enhanced abilities to interact with their alien heritage species in ways that benefit both human and alien interests. Elena activated a holographic display showing statistical comparisons. Institutional approaches, by contrast, produce individuals who are technically competent but often struggle with identity issues and social integration. Commissioner David Park, representing the Colonial Defense Forces, raised a concern that many military officials shared. Dr. Vasquez, while the social benefits are clear, how do we address legitimate security concerns? These children possess capabilities that could be exploited by hostile forces. Before Elena could respond, Zara rose from her seat in the gallery. Commissioner Park, may I address that question? Admiral Morrison looked surprised but nodded her approval. Please proceed, Miss Chun. Zara walked to the witness stand with poise that seemed remarkable for her age, but Sarah knew her daughter had been preparing for this moment for months. The entire mixed heritage community understood that this hearing could determine whether they would be accepted as full members of human society or remain perpetual refugees. Commissioner Park, you're right that we have abilities that normal humans don't possess, Zara said, her voice clear and confident. But you're wrong to think that makes us security risks. Our enhanced abilities come with enhanced understanding of the consequences of using them irresponsibly. She gestured toward the other young people in the gallery. Alex can perceive electromagnetic fields in ways that make him incredibly valuable for detecting hidden technology or communication systems. Maya's empathic abilities allow her to assess the emotional states of both humans and aliens with extraordinary accuracy. Lucy Henderson can process mathematical concepts at speeds that make her contributions to navigation and engineering invaluable. And your own abilities, Miss Chin? Commissioner Park asked. I can understand linguistic patterns and cultural concepts faster than baseline humans, which makes me useful for establishing communication with new species. But, more importantly, I understand what it means to be human because I was raised by humans who loved me. Zara's silver eyes seemed to focus directly on each commissioner in turn. That's what you miss when you try to separate us from our families. We don't develop loyalty to humanity because you force it on us. We develop it because we experience the best of what humanity offers. The hearing room fell completely silent. Sarah felt tears threatening as she watched her daughter articulate concepts that had taken adult advocates years to develop. This was Marcus's child, she realized, possessing not just enhanced intelligence, but the moral courage to speak truth to power when it mattered most. Admiral Morrison exchanged glances with her fellow commissioners before responding. Miss Chun, if the policies under consideration today are approved, mixed heritage children would be raised by their families with enhanced educational support rather than institutional placement. They would also be eligible for specialized training programs designed to develop their abilities for peaceful purposes. Would you and your peers be interested in participating in such programs? Yes, ma'am. But only if participation is voluntary and families retain the right to withdraw if programs don't serve their children's best interests. Zara's response was immediate and firm. We want to contribute to humanity's future among the stars, but not at the cost of losing our connection to human community. The formal vote came 3 days later, after extensive closed-door discussions and testimony from dozens of additional witnesses. The colonial authorities' new policy established the legal right of mixed heritage children to remain with their families while receiving specialized educational opportunities. More importantly, it recognized them as full human citizens with the same rights and protections as any other colonist. The celebration that evening in New Harmony's rebuilt community center was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Families who had spent years hiding their children's abilities now spoke openly about their hopes and dreams for the future. Children who had grown up believing they were dangerous anomalies now understood themselves as bridges between species and pioneers of humanity's expansion into a larger galactic community. Thomas Reeves, who had served as the community's representative throughout the legal proceedings, raised a toast as the evening wound down. To the children who showed us that being different is not the same as being dangerous, and to the parents who never stopped believing their love was stronger than fear. Sarah found herself standing beside Dr. Vasquez, both of them watching as Zara and her friends planned what they called a first contact preparation program for other mixed heritage children throughout human space. She's remarkable, Elena observed quietly. In 3 years, she's gone from being a refugee to becoming one of the most effective advocates for her entire demographic. Marcus would be proud, Sarah replied, feeling the familiar ache of loss tempered by recognition of how much their daughter had accomplished. He always said the most important battles were the ones fought to make things better for the next generation. What's next for you two? Now that she has legal protection and educational opportunities, you could go anywhere in human space. Sarah considered the question while watching Zara demonstrate some kind of mathematical concept to a group of younger children using hand gestures and sound patterns that seemed to communicate meaning directly without words. Her daughter had developed abilities that truly were extraordinary, but, more importantly, she had developed the wisdom to use them responsibly. I think we'll stay here, at least for now. New Harmony isn't just a refuge anymore. It's become a center for research and education that serves the entire mixed heritage community. Sarah smiled as Zara caught her eye and waved enthusiastically. Besides, Zara has work to do, and I want to support that however I can. Research work, communication protocols for first contact with new species, educational programs for newly integrated mixed heritage families, advocacy training for other children who want to speak for themselves rather than having adults speak for them. Sarah's voice carried quiet pride and amazement. She's 10 years old, and she's already planning projects that could shape humanity's future for generations. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The desperate flight from Kepler Colony seemed like a lifetime ago. The frightened woman who had stolen a hover truck and fled into the mountains had been replaced by someone who understood that protecting her daughter meant more than keeping her safe. It meant helping her become the person she was meant to be. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns, and Sarah imagined Marcus somewhere among them, watching as their extraordinary daughter prepared to help humanity take its place in a universe full of wonders they were only beginning to understand. The war had taken her husband, but it had also led to discoveries and changes that would benefit countless children like Zara for generations to come. That seemed like a legacy worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, and worth celebrating when victory finally came.